Hey y'all, how's it going? It's David with I'm So Offended. Um, been a minute, but got a couple videos. I'm either gonna do them both together here or separately. But as always, um, I'm not a lawyer. I don't practice law. This is for educational and entertainment purposes. Um, and I'm not responsible for whatever outcome, anything that you do here, or and all I do is just you know I just read, show you things, and give you examples, and y'all are free to do whatever y'all want to do. But wanted to touch on something. Um, Basically, the entire system of child support is focused on nothing other the difference between basically you being in jail and not, and the contempt proceedings and whatever it may be. It all comes down to the ability to pay. That's it. The ability to pay. I'm sure we've all heard the or seen the Department of Justice Dear Colleague letter, you know, and some of you guys like even put it in your case, and you say things like, "Oh, but it doesn't do nothing," or they don't do, it it's basically like you're invoking your rights. It's just something to add along with your filings, but all it really is just affirming that the ability to pay is what it all comes down to. All right. So contempt is two things, right? Willful contempt is the willful disregard, or basically willfully disobeying a court order, and having the ability to pay for such order. All right, so we could go through the letter and a bunch of, I don't know if you guys have actually read through it or you just skimmed through it or whatever, but it continuously brings up the same thing. And one of the things that Chris told me, it was a quote by, I don't remember who it was, and I know Chris is going to get at me about it, but might have been Thomas Jeff. It's in his videos, but he said like something, and I'm going to butcher it. If you don't if you don't invoke your rights, you don't deserve to have any. Okay, and as I've stated before, you got to have the balls to do these things, because they don't care, right? We've all established that. So let's go through this, and you'll see what I mean as far as what this all comes down to. So we've all seen this, the Dear Colleague letter, right? And in case you don't know, there was a letter written from the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, basically the Department of Justice, uh, you know, um, is there to protect civil rights and liberties of individuals, the people, and then certain uh, basically to protect the people from whatever it may be, even if it's not just a person, but like let's say um, versus the people, in which they do their lawsuits on behalf of the people for something that is for the greater good of the people, so anyway, so they issued this Dear Colleague letter, and they've issued several of them. Some of them having to do with rights for school, some of them having to do with, this one here. So, just basically, um, the Department of Justice being the head of all, saying to the other courts, like, hey, like, this is how you're supposed to do things. These are the rules, like you're supposed to protect the people, right? So, um, as it says, Department of Justice committed to assisting state and local courts in their efforts to ensure equal justice and due process for all those who come before them, right? So, um, 2015, department convened a diverse group of stakeholders judges, courts, administrators, lawmakers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, advocates, and impacted individuals to discuss the assessment and enforcement of fines and fees in the state and local courts. While the convening made plain that unlawful and harmful practices exist in certain jurisdictions throughout the country, has also highlighted a number of reform efforts underway by state leaders, judicial officers, and advocates, and underscored the commitment of all the participants to continue addressing these critical issues. So now we're not going to go ahead, going to read through the whole thing because we don't need to. You can read this. You can literally just Google DOJ dear colleague letter, and then you could put child support and it'll pop up. This is available also on the Department of Justice website. Okay. So, in that second paragraph there, recent years have seen increased attention on the illegal enforcement of fines and fees in certain jurisdictions around the country, often with respect to individuals accused of misdemeanors, quasi-criminal ordinance violations, or civil infractions. Typically, courts do not sentence defendants to incarceration in those cases. Monetary fines are the norm, yet the harm, next page, caused by unlawful practices in these jurisdictions can be profound. So, the ability to pay, right? So to help judicial actors protect individuals' rights and avoid unnecessary harm, we discuss below a set of basic constitutional principles relevant to the enforcement of fines and fees. These principles, grounded in the rights of due process and equal protection, require the following. First and foremost, number one, courts must not incarcerate a person for non-payment of fines or fees without first conducting an indigency determination and establishing that the failure to pay was willful. That's number one. Because you cannot be incarcerated over a debt. Although it's basically against the law to be homeless in this country with all the statutes and ordinances that cities are putting into, clearly by hateful people that are putting these things in place. I haven't been political in this page, and I'm not trying to be political or anything like that, but I mean, I'm only going to state the facts that it is mostly Republicans that have been making these kinds of laws, and the New York City mayor, he's an absolute piece of shit, and even though he's Democrat and New York is mainly Democrat, but still, I mean, this guy was a former cop, and so he thinks like them as far as violating people's rights, and so but this is not about what's politically about anything like that. It's just that first and foremost, they have to determine the ability to pay, right? And they're not going to do that unless you invoke your rights. I was actually in a hearing, because I'm going through a custody issue, and I was telling you guys about it, and I want to wait until it's all done so that way I can tell you guys the whole process of this custody thing I'm doing. And I'll just mention that they had filed something that was past the date of when it could be filed, right? Lots of times in statutes and codes and whatever your state rules or whatever, it says you have 30 days to file something, some kind of response, 20 days to file a response to a motion. You have 30 days to file for an amendment, 60 days an appeal, whatever it may be, right? So get this. So they had filed against me a motion to amend. They wanted to amend a judgment, okay? But it was in the statute that they couldn't file it past 30 days, right, to alter or amend a judgment. They filed it almost 3 months after. Now, in that same statute, it said that the court, on a motion of its own, can dismiss it. But however, The court did not. This judge did not. I had to file a response and say, hey, under this statute that they're using, it says that they can't file past the 30 days. And, and I went into the hearing, and the judge was like, well, I agree with Mr. Quintero. This is what the statute says. But the thing is, had I not invoked that right under the statute, they would have just let him do it. So, yes, if dudes are, if you guys are, or something, well, I mean, if you're watching this, you're not in jail. But if you have gone or will be going, they don't tell you and don't help you, but you have the ability to avoid that. And you have to invoke your rights. You have to invoke the Turner versus Rogers hearing. You have to request an indigency hearing. They have to prove the ability to pay. This is a criminal action now. If they want to incarcerate you, that is criminal. Criminal. All right? That's when you have all constitutional protections. They claim that they don't exist, but this all starts administrative, right? Under the guise of family law, right? And then it becomes criminal for a willful contempt of failure to obey a court order, right? But if it's willful, they need to prove the ability to pay. And what they want is you to incriminate yourself. What is the first document that you guys get? And this is what you guys send me, because you guys tell me what's going on in your case, and then I ask you, all right, send me the documents so that I can read what's really going on, because you don't know. Half the time you guys have no idea what's going on. They send you the document, but you can't read between the lines about what's really happening. So in those documents that they send you, first of all, it's a lawsuit. That's what they're doing. They're filing a lawsuit against you. And in the first page, it tells you how to get out of it. It tells you the ability to pay is vital or is important, and so that's why they then say they want your W-2s, they want your wage statements, your taxes, and all of that. They want you to provide evidence to them to use against you. All right? Listen carefully. They want to incarcerate you for not following the court order of paying the debt that they conjured up. And they're like, all right, here's what we need. Give us all these documents. They're going to use that against you. That's what they're doing, right? Now, they summons you to court, but they don't file a warrant for those documents. They don't subpoena those documents. They subpoena you. All right? It's separate. You have a Fourth Amendment right, your right to privacy, to be secure in your papers, in your house, in your effects, in your property, right? So you don't have to give them anything, unless it be by a warrant or court order. Now, they're asking you to produce those documents, but they're ordering you to arrive and be present for the hearing. Okay? And they're asking you for those documents. Okay? You also have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and to not provide them with evidence to incriminate you. That's Miranda. Anything you can and will be say, and Anything, like when someone gets arrested or whatever, um, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. You know what they just stated right there? The Fifth Amendment. That's in every part of Miranda. That's why it's called. Miranda is because it happened to someone named Miranda who then filed a lawsuit, went to appeals and all that, and forever it's called Miranda because they did not disclose, right? So you're not getting arrested here, but you know what they did disclose? That the ability to pay is vital, right? So they are disclosing what it's about. So now the ability to pay is up to them to prove. You don't have to give them anything. You don't have to do anything other than invoke your right to an indigency hearing. They have to prove the ability to pay, and you can show up with nothing on your person. Okay? And we don't need to get into to person, entity, all this and all that. There's a thing called a proper person, propria persona, which is basically as a man or woman, right? We don't need to get into all that because once you start talking about all that, it doesn't. They start calling you a sovereign citizen. I've been called that before, and they want to bring all that up. So that's why you gotta play by their rules, even though they don't do it. But at least procedurally, you can play by the rules. What I've noticed is once I started following the rules, once I started playing by the rules, I've had things go in my favor. So it's vital, you know. Someone said that court is a gentleman's game. You know, you say please and thank you, and you invoke your rights. No, I'm not interested. If you saw my videos, I said no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not here for any of that. No, thank you. I do not consent. Not interested. I didn't yell. I didn't cuss. I didn't raise my voice at nobody. I said, you don't have jurisdiction over me. I appreciate your question, but I'm not interested. You know, even though you are legally allowed to go kicking and screaming, you know, but you don't need to do all that. You don't need to do all that. You can calmly just invoke your rights and tell them you have to prove the ability to pay, not me. You do. I'm not giving you anything. Feel free to subpoena anybody you want. Go for it. You know, courts must not incarcerate a person for non-payment of fines or fees without first conducting an indigency determination and establishing that the failure to pay was willful. Courts must consider alternatives to incarceration for indigent defendants unable to pay fees and fines and fees. Courts must not condition access to a judicial hearing on the prepayment of fines and fees. Basically, we all have access to the court. Courts must provide meaningful notice and, in appropriate cases, counsel when enforcing fines and fees. Yes, of course, we all have the right to counsel. Now, obviously, having an attorney gives them jurisdiction, so that's why you don't say you waive your right to counsel. You just say, I waive no rights. I reserve all my rights and waive none. Okay, the moment you agree to an attorney, they have jurisdiction, right? The moment you don't agree to an attorney, it's also a way for them to trick you. So you just don't waive any rights because they then could give you an attorney, or they could say that, well, we tried to provide them an attorney. No. I'll find my own attorney. I'm not waiving my right to an attorney. I'll find my own. You can say that, right? Courts must not use arrest warrants or license suspensions as a means of coercing the payment of court debt when the individual has not been afforded constitutionally adequate procedural protections. So this, when it comes down to, like, if you guys get your license suspended and all that, the first immediate thing you can do is file an objection and reinstatement. You know, uh, it it would have to be in that administrative court, and then you can highlight this particular part: must not use warrants or license suspections because they just did it without notice, opportunity to be heard in a fair and impartial tribunal. If they send you a letter saying that they're gonna suspend your license, the first thing it says in there is that you can object within 10 days. 10 days, 15 days, whatever it may be, but it gives you time, right? And they want you to pay, whatever it may be, or it tells you that you can file something. So that's where you have to file that you object, and they must first have an indigency hearing. And then courts must not employ bail or bond practices that cause indigent defendants to remain incarcerated solely because they cannot afford to pay for their release. And courts must safeguard against unconstitutional practices by court staff and private contractors. Why was that brought up? Because the child support agency, is a private contractor. Courts must not incarcerate a person for non-payment of fees or fines without first conducting an indigency determination establishing the failure to pay was willful. You have case law in here that you can use in your objection. Highlights it again: alternatives to incarceration. And you have case law in here. Courts must not condition access to a judicial hearing on prepayment of fines or fees. You have case law in here because you have the right to access the court. Meaningful notice, counsel, and enforcing fines and fees. You have case law here, and then it tells you where the case is, the options, and then examples. Like, this is really good. Sure, you could file this in, but you can use pieces of this to put in your document, in your pleading, in your objection. Look at this one here. It even mentions Turner. Under the 14th Amendment, defendants likewise may be entitled to counsel in civil contempt proceedings for failure to pay fines or fees. See Turner. And that is the Turner versus Rogers hearing that, is basically like the girth of invoking your rights, of telling them that if this is a criminal proceeding, which it is, I have the right to an indigency hearing. You have to prove the ability to pay. And here, for licenses, must not use arrest warrants or license suspension as a means of coercion, right? And there in the following paragraph, to compel the payment of outstanding court debts. If a defendant's driver's license is suspended because of failure to pay a fine, such a suspension may be unlawful if the defendant was deprived of his due process right to establish inability to pay. And there, look, and it gives you the case law. The driver's license may be, look, the quote, may become essential in the pursuit of a livelihood and thus are not to be taken away without the procedural due process required by the 14th Amendment. Courts must safeguard against unconstitutional practices. This has a lot of good stuff in here that you could write your pleadings out of, from your contempt proceeding, from a license suspension. It doesn't say passport, but it's a decent argument that you can use, especially if you work overseas or if you have some kind of a family related emergency. But as far as passports are concerned, uh, here's something I want you to think about if you ever had your passport revoked, right? Um, there's people that have traveled and have had their passports stolen, and and then what? That means they're stuck in the other country? No. You take the flight, you come back, and you deal with the, or you go to an embassy and you just tell them who you are. I have crossed without a passport. We're all property of the state. We all belong to the state. The U.S. wants its property back. If you travel another country and you get robbed, you lose your passport, come back. You could come back, and they're not going to prevent you from coming in. The U.S. wants its property back. Tell them who you are. My passport was stolen. I lost it. Whatever. They're like, all right, then what's your name? What's your social security number? Where do you live? Can people verify you? Whatever. That's it. And you'll come in. So I even crossed Mexico several times where they're like, oh, you don't have a passport? I'm like, yeah, I have one, but it's expired. And they're like, oh, that doesn't matter. They don't care. Like, you could come and go, you know? So, anyways, um, just something to think about if you're looking through the documents. If you're looking through this one, you know, this is a free available document that you can have that you don't have to pay anyone for, that has a lot of good beef for what it is you need in your documents. All right. So yeah, so this is at the 27 mark and it's a little too long. I try to keep them around 20 minutes or less. So I am going to do another video on the COL form, but we'll conclude this one for now. All right, like, share, subscribe. Y'all can hit me up on the email and answer your questions and this and that and whatever. If we got to do a call, obviously there has, a donation would be great because it takes up my time. All this takes up my time, and I guess we'll talk next time.